Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, Intro to Franchise Ownership. My name is Kelly Blount, and I'm the Program Marketing Specialist here at General Electric Credit Union. We're so glad you've joined us as we have a lot of great content ahead. Thanks to technology, we're excited to be able to connect with you on such a great topic and wanted to thank you all for tuning in from the comfort of your home, work, or wherever you may be today. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jason Lyda to introduce himself and today's guest speaker.
Thanks, Kelly. As Kelly mentioned, my name is Jason Lyda, and I head up the Business Support and Treasury Management Group here at General Electric Credit Union, which is simply the deposit function of the different products and services we offer to our business members. We have a variety of business-specific deposit and lending products and services that help businesses of all sizes manage their cash flow, mitigate risk, and ultimately grow and succeed. We offer these business-specific webinars to assist our members improve the quality of their financial life. If we can assist you or your business with some deposit products or lending needs, or if you just want to talk, please let us know. Our contact information is there, and you'll see that later on in the slide. Now for the fun part. I would like to introduce our presenter, Chris Meibers. Chris has nearly 20 years of executive leadership experience developing consumer brands across a variety of industries. He has spent the last 8 years working in the franchise industry, playing an instrumental role in dozens of brands, franchising programs, and hundreds of new unit openings. Chris's roles span the franchise spectrum, as he has served as an executive on the franchisor side, is an active franchisee himself in a business services franchise, and is a certified franchise consultant, helping many individuals learn about the franchise process and find new business ownership opportunities. Chris, thanks for joining us today, and the floor and the screens are all yours.
Jason, thank you so much, and thanks everybody for attending and future listeners for downloading digitally and listening to this. And I'm excited to talk a little bit about franchise ownership. And today's conversation is going to be really focused on the 101, really explaining, what franchising is and some of the do's and don'ts and best practices. So for many of you who have just an initial curiosity of franchise ownership and want to learn more about what to look for, the pros, the cons, what the process may involve, I think you're going to find a lot of helpful information in today's conversation. And Jason did such a great job of kind of giving a little bit about my background, but I will take a second just to explain, what our firm does. We've been around for about 4 years and operating under the franchise department. And we do really a mix. And I think we bring that mix into, the franchisee services that we do. We service a lot of franchisors, so that's the parent brand themselves, and we help establish franchise programs and franchise systems. So think of, Bob's business, whatever he may be operating, we can help Bob take his business and become a franchise. That's really where we cut our teeth, and we take our learnings from that side of the franchise industry and really bring that back into helping individuals like many of you listening today and understanding what to look for when exploring franchise ownership to see if it's for you in general, and if it is, what the right franchise opportunity may be. So, with that, we can just dive right into the content. And I really want to kind of level set today's conversation with explaining what is a franchise. Legally speaking, which again, just the mere term of legally speaking, gets people's eyes to roll. But legally speaking, there is a definition of franchise, and that is a business relationship between two parties. And in this case, it's the franchisor and the franchisee that consists of 3 components: a granting of trademarks or IP rights from the franchisor to the franchisee, a significant set of operational and/or marketing standards and controls within that system, and then the initial and/or ongoing fees that are paid for the rights to conduct the given business. That's the legal definition that is most commonly recognized not only at a federal level, but at a state level. And I'll talk about, how the federal and the state regulation comes into play a little bit through our conversation. Using more a practical definition, a franchise is a business model that is built by somebody else, and then they're opening opportunities for franchisees to come into that system and operate within a certain set of operational standards and setting defined by the franchisor. The rose-colored definition that we often say in the industry is, when you're looking at operating a franchise, it gives you the opportunity to be in business for yourself, but not by yourself, right? So you have the luxury in a lot of cases of being able to operate within the business and having the support of a larger team at a corporate level to keep eyes on the business and keep eyes on the market and how those trends may shift. So that is kind of the intro definition of what a franchise is. And I'm sure all of us have, examples that we can, experience, whether it's driving up Montgomery Road here in Cincinnati, you see 40 to 50 franchises every mile you drive. Those are experiential brands that we all know very well. But really, franchising, it kind of spans every nook and cranny of every industry on a B2B and B2C level. And we'll illustrate that here a little bit more later in the presentation. So, that's kind of what a franchise is. And now the next slide, I'd love to just show you some high level stats that I think speak to just how immense franchising as an industry is within just the US. And these numbers here are released by the IFA, so franchising.org, and they're compiled by FranData, and they're based on every franchise system kind of pulls into this one data set. And these are the metrics that tell us where we ended fiscal year 2021. And just based on some of the development projections this year in franchising, they've got a pretty good sense of where this fiscal year in 2022 is going to end up. And just some of the highlights here. In 2021, we netted out on a US level with 21,000 new franchise units operated. Now that unit can be a brick and mortar building, or it could be a home service franchise where it might just be one guy or gal working out of their basement. That's defined as one unit. So you can see in 2021, we grew 21,000, but obviously we all know what happened to us in 2020. So really 2021 was getting back to the water level that was kind of established in 2019. You can see there that 2019, we were right around 775,000 units. That's where we ended last year. And the way we're pacing this year, we'll project to close in right around 800,000 total operating franchise units across the US at the end of fiscal year 2022. All of those units are helping contribute nearly $500 billion to the US GDP. Now, GDP is not paying any of our gas bills or paying any of our rents. So what that translates in is it's an immense impact on the labor market, an immense impact on the US economy as a whole. And you best believe that there are a lot of franchisees that are benefiting from proven models that they can invest and be owners in, and they're really reaping those benefits. And you see that in just the economic impact across the entire US. And then just looking at more of a micro level where I think a lot of us are going to reside, or myself, if nobody else, Ohio as a state boasted 30,000 franchises operating at the end of fiscal year 21. And that's nearly a 5% growth year over year. And we'll pace again at another 5 or 6% growth as we close out 2022. So safe to say that the economic impact is robust, and the recovery is, basically got us back at the end of 2021 where we were in 2019. And we're just going to continue to put that ebb state behind us and continue in that flow state as we traverse through 2022. So those are some of the franchising stats. And the next slide here, just want to highlight some of the known or maybe unknown advantages to owning a franchise. Number one is brand awareness, right? So we're going to enter into a system. If we're a franchisee investing into a franchise model, we're investing into a system where we're able to leverage existing brand awareness that's often far greater than we would have if we just opened our own business concept from scratch. So, the mega example of that would be a McDonald's, but the more approachable example is just any franchise that may have 20, 30 units. They're going to have a little more brand awareness under their belt than if we just started our own business concept from scratch. And that, for a lot of franchisees, is an immense advantage when they look at, scratching their entrepreneurial itch. They get to walk into a door where there's already ready-built brand awareness. The proven model. This is the other one I think a lot of franchise systems and franchisees especially are attracted to, is a lot of the components of the business model have been vetted out and they've really been proven far beyond conceptual state, but they've kind of been perfected and really, let to marinate over, in some cases, decades for some of these models, where they've really kind of tightened down all the nuts and bolts of the model. And as many of us know that have started our own business from scratch, some of those things are hard to prove out, and they're costly, both monetarily and time consuming, to really tighten down all the systems and processes within our business model. In a well-run franchise system, a lot of those things have already been proven and really kind of baked out over a period of time. And franchisees can walk into a proven model which they take advantage of. The next one is scalability. And this really is an advantage that is a benefit to not only franchisees, but franchisors alike. And as I mentioned, we do a lot of work on both sides, servicing franchisors and their systems, as well as franchisees. The ability to grow quickly in a franchise, we see examples of this every day. And I'll use one from my life. And it's, ironically, this is where I connected with Jason years back. We had a brand started here in Cincinnati, Ohio, Cycle Bar franchising. We opened up our first proof of concept in late 2014, Q4 of 2014. And within 3 years, by the power of franchising and bringing in experienced and well-vetted franchise partners, we were able to take that system from 1 unit in Cincinnati, Ohio, to 125 units by Q4 in 2017. So in about 3 years' time, we were able to go from 1 to 125 units, and obviously all the economic growth that comes with that, and an eventual exit to a publicly traded company. So scalability is not only a benefit from the franchisor side, but it really is a benefit of the franchisees as well, because again, going back to that brand awareness, that scalability tide is going to lift every franchisee within that system. And it can really be unlocked at a much faster pace by a well-built franchise system where you're bringing in the right franchise partners to help you grow exponentially. Buying power. This is a big one. When we look at a business's P&L, there's only so much buying power you have if you're just a one-off, husband and wife team that's going to open your own business. More power to you. That's great, but that is a tough road sometimes. And a lot of times where a franchise can offer advantage is they've got access to purchasing power, vendor accessibility, all the things that are really going to help drive not only the top line of your operating P&L, but really tamp down some of those COGS and operating costs on the other side of your P&L. So it really is going to set the stage for potential profitability just by having the buying power of a 30 or a 50 or 100 unit brand. When you yourself are just an operator of a single unit in one market, you can really leverage that through a franchise system. The ongoing support is another huge advantage. Initially, when you enter into a franchise, there's certainly some upfront support and training that you'll get. But what we really love is the ongoing support. And I think another way of phrasing that is, for anybody that's been a business owner of your own concept, probably the most challenging thing is working day to day in the business and yet balancing the amount that you're able to keep your eyes on the business. That is a tough task to do. In franchising, it's inherently set up that way. You've got a corporate team that is continually looking at how to augment the business, how to adjust to market trends and consumer trends, how to make sure that the business offering to the end consumer or the end business consumer is going to be best. They're able to keep eyes on the business while you, the franchisee, can really focus on working day to day in the business in your market. So that ongoing support, that ongoing training, and the ongoing evolution that is provided from a well-heeled franchisor, franchisees will often find an immense amount of benefit in just that aspect of franchising alone. And all 5 of those bullet points that I mentioned above, they all kind of bundle up and lead to higher potential of earnings and return. And I say potential, that's a key word in franchising. There are no promises in business ownership in general, and there's certainly no promises or misrepresentations in franchising. If you're looking at franchising, whether we're assisting or you're talking to other trusted advisors in the space, If anybody makes promises, that should be a red flag that raises up. But there is certainly potential. And I think those potential earnings and return on investment, you may have an advantageous step in unlocking some of those just by bundling up some of those, if not all of the 5 bullet points I listed above. The brand awareness, that tide is going to lift. You're going to have a proven model that's going to make ease of launch and ease of use and basically ease of reaching maturity for your local business unit. Scalability is, again, going to help spread brand awareness, ergo create more brand equity. The buying power is going to help manage your P&L, both top line and bottom line. And that ongoing support is really going to be an inherent way that your business unit is going to have eyes in the business and on the business all at the same time. All of those roads lead to higher potential of earnings and return for the business venture if you choose to get into franchise ownership. So those are some of our favorite advantages to owning a franchise. And certainly with advantages, there are disadvantages. And in the case of these 5 that I listed here, I think some of those are perceived disadvantages sometimes. I could make the case as I go through that some of them are actually advantages, but nonetheless, you want to be aware of these things when you go into it. I think most people that get into franchise ownership, they've got an entrepreneurial itch, and you want to make sure that the franchise offering and the franchise opportunity that you get into is able to scratch that itch. And I think that's a good segue into the first one here, which is franchising is not entirely independent. So as much as we have franchisees that really benefit from, owning a business for themselves, but not by themselves, there are some entrepreneurs out there that just want to create. And my comparison for that, I've got 2 dear friends of mine that are both musicians. One makes a living playing cover bands. The other one would rather roll over than play somebody else's music. And that's just the way some people are wired. So when we talk to individuals that want to explore franchising, we want to tap on that. How autonomous do they want to be? How much do they have to create? Or are they willing to kind of fit into a system where a lot of the pieces are already put in place? It really should be somewhat of a paint by numbers process. If that's not going to align with where people want to be in their business venture and their business ownership style, that's just something to be aware of. So it's not 100% independent. There's ongoing fees. And I would contend that in most cases, a well-run franchise, those fees come with a good value proposition, right? You're getting the brand awareness, the name, the proven model, all the things that go with that. So those fees are commensurate to that. But oftentimes, for a not so well-run franchise system, those ongoing fees become just like taxes being paid to Uncle Sam, right? The franchisor's taking 6-7% royalties on a regular basis, and the franchisee is left scratching their head saying, wait a minute, I still got potholes on my street. What am I really getting for this? So you really want to understand the nature of those ongoing fees and what the value proposition is for those. I think the ongoing fees in most successful franchise systems are fair, but all franchises are not created equal. So you want to do your homework on that and just understand that going into the venture. Another potential disadvantage, or just something to be aware of, is there is an intra-system risk, right? If they let too many yahoos into the party, then the party becomes a party of yahoos, right? And in franchise speak, if they're letting anybody into their franchise system, that may directly or in turn indirectly and in time impact your local unit. So if we're here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and you've got a franchise and you take great care of that, you protect it like a Fabergé egg. You're a great franchisee. Well, that's all well and good until the franchisee in Dayton, Ohio may not take care of that, right? So it's just like having a good lawn on your street. You may take care of your yard. If your neighbor doesn't, it's going to impact how people are going to perceive the entire street. So there is an intra-system risk for franchisors that just kind of let anybody into the system. So be aware of that in the exploration process. And certainly that's something that as franchise consultants, we help our clients look out for. Franchisor control is another one, somewhat related to that first bullet point, but just be aware of where the controls are that the franchisor is going to put down. It's one thing to follow a process, but if there are parts of that process where you really want to usurp some creativity or have a little bit more autonomy, you just want to know that going in. Otherwise, you're going to get into a situation where you wanted all the things about owning a business and being independent and kind of creating your own destiny. But if that's not going to line up with how you want to operate on a day-to-day, and really have to follow somebody else's script, you kind of want to explore that going into it. I don't think personally that it's a disadvantage unless you're unaware of it and you step into it a little too early or unbeknownst to you. Then it can become a disadvantage and something that you really don't like to operate day to day underneath somebody's tight controls. And then the other thing to look out for, again, could be a disadvantage, may not, but there is a typical 10-year duration to a franchise agreement. So just understand that. A lot of people, I think, jump on trends that they see right now, and that can all be well and good. But you really want to step back and look at a franchise opportunity and understand, hey, if I'm signing a 10-year franchise agreement, where is this thing going to be in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? Just like any investment, it's not just about the today. It really is also about the tomorrow and the entire duration of the agreement. So you just want to know that going into it. So those are disadvantage or maybe perceived disadvantages of owning a franchise. It's not always rosy. I think like any venture, there's good and bad, and I think you want to explore both sides of it before you get into it. So with that, we can hop to the next slide. What are the types of franchises? I kind of mentioned this earlier, but it really spans everything. We all know the giants. We know Chick-fil-A, we know McDonald's, we know Subway. Those are the behemoths. Those are also unicorns in some extent, and I'll explain that here in a minute. But really every product or service that is offered on a B2C or B2B level, there's a franchise for it. We've got a franchise that we just started working with this week. Their whole model is picking up dog poop in residential backyards. Dog poop and goose poop, that's the franchise. So if you think about it, everything from the golden arches to picking up dog poop in people's yards and everything in between, there's a franchise for it. The way we break it down on our website, and there's a little snapshot there in the bottom right corner, we divide them up into 25 industries. Depending on how you want to describe that, you could probably double tap on that and get it into maybe 60 or 70 sub industries. So there is no shortage of franchise concepts out there that literally span everything from health and beauty and food and childcare, senior care, everything in between. So there is, there's no other way to say it than there's over, 6,000 different franchise concepts out there, and they really span every industry that can be thought of. The investment ranges of a franchise, that's another common question we get. That again probably spans as deep and as broad just as the industries that they cover themselves. We've got franchise investments that can be as low as $25,000 all in to start your business concept. And we certainly have some that are well into the millions. So the factors there are going to include, the business model itself and the industry. Those are going to lend to certain investment levels. Whether you have a brick and mortar, those are inherently going to have more cost to build a 3,000 square foot brick and mortar concept versus working out of your house. And there's also a difference in price, depending on how you look at the number of units or the size of territory that you're going to buy. So there really is every industry, every investment level. So if you're looking for a franchise, in theory, there could be something for everyone. We break the business models down into a couple key categories: owner operator, the business format. Business format is considered something that you're going to run from more of an executive level or maybe semi-absentee. Then there's some less common, investment franchises are typically defined as, real estate plays. So if you think about, hotelier that's going to franchise a certain, let's use Marriott as an example, and then that franchisee may hire a management service company. Those are obviously high ticket franchise investments. We really don't swim in those waters. We have colleagues that do, so I didn't highlight it here. There's also certain, production and distribution franchises that are a little bit off the grid, a little more nuanced. We don't play in those waters as much. The last one I mentioned here, which is really interesting, there are conversion franchises. These could either be resales of an existing franchise, So maybe somebody owns a home painting franchise that's been established for 5 to 7, 8 years, maybe. They've got proven revenue. They're looking to sell that business. Somebody new could come in, buy a franchise agreement, and then buy that existing business. In theory, because there's established revenue, established profitability, the purchase price may be higher than if you started it on your own. But the flip side of that is you don't have to go through the 5, 6, 7 years of business building that local franchisee has done over the last half a decade. So there are conversion opportunities, but if you're starting anew, you really focus on those top two that I listed there. Owner operator, which means you're kind of doing the service or the product placement of the business itself, or the business format, which is most typically hire a manager. You kind of work behind the scenes at more of an executive level or maybe even a semi-absentee level. So those are the general breakdowns on just what types of franchises are out there for individuals. Regulation and investment. This inherently is the regulation part especially is boring, but I think it's necessary to mention. Franchising is heavily regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, and then it disseminates rights down to each state level. So each state's going to have a little bit of a different regulatory system on how they vet franchises or authorize businesses to operate as franchises within your state. So we can get into the nuance of that on a maybe a 201 webinar, or certainly if we connect offline here. But it's worth mentioning that franchising being heavily regulated, it allows for a lot of disclosure. So the information is out there. And as a former CFO myself, or a recovering CFO, as I say, discovery is key. So the data is there. And I think it's important that before you get into any venture, business venture, you want to learn about the business venture. You want to assess the investment. Franchising does a great job of making sure that all that information is out there and available. And frankly, the franchisor has to disclose it on any interested candidate. They have to disclose that information. It's going to tell you everything you need to know about the franchisor, the business model, what the franchisor provides, what the franchisee is expected to provide, what the upfront investment will cost, and it'll shed some light, without making promises, it'll shed some light on what the KPIs or what the business metrics are going to be, so that you can get a little bit of a grasp on what that potential return will be on that investment. And the other thing, speaking of investment, it's important, and something we talk about with all of our clients, that owning a franchise is an investment, not only on one level, but most often on two levels. One, there's a monetary. Obviously, you've got an upfront franchise fee. You've got business startup costs that you have to cover. Those are disclosed in the franchise disclosure documents. You've got ongoing royalties and potentially other fees that come with that. So certainly we want to understand the monetary investment. There's also a time investment. And I think that time investment is so key to assess. Some models are owner operator. So it might be 50, 60 hours a week. That's your full-time job. Some are more of an executive, where you still might be working full-time, but maybe you're not grinding day to day out in the field, but you're kind of working behind the scenes. Some are semi-absentee. There are some that are more absentee, or just letting your money work for you. You really want to understand, based on the franchise model, not only how much money you're going to invest, but how much time are you going to have to put into this thing? Because that's really how you're going to gauge not only the ROI from a monetary standpoint, but the quality of life. So that's regulation and investment in a nutshell. And I think it's important to really understand both of those when you're exploring a franchise opportunity. And we can look at the next slide here, the proverbial question. We get calls 5 to 10 every week. Chris, find me the perfect franchise. Well, let me, as illustrated here by my Dr. Evil air quotes, there is no perfect franchise. The perfect franchise does not exist. Franchisors are not created equal. There are no guarantees in the business. So it's like any business venture, there is risk. Timing can be everything. A great franchise to invest in 10 years ago, it might be saturated. All the market, may be gobbled up by now. So timing is very key. And like timing does, it changes, it ebbs and flows. Investment levels and ROI potential are going to vary greatly. And the unicorns are rare and costly. So we get a couple calls a week about, we want a Chick-fil-A or we want a McDonald's. Okay, we all do. And if I could find one out there that was not cost prohibitive, we would have those too. But, just by way of example, the average McDonald's is going to, not only is there a long queue to get in line and get a good territory for McDonald's, but once you do, if your number's called, you're looking at somewhere around a $2.3 million investment. That was, what they released on last year's statistics. So I don't think that there is the perfect franchise, but that's a segue to the next slide that, where we really try and work with interested parties that want to explore franchising and see if there might be a fit. I think there is a perfect franchise for you, for the individual. And, we always advise that, with the help of consultants, but also with other trusted advisors within your circle, certainly your team, your family, just some good introspection and understanding what you want to get out of it. I think the hunt for your perfect franchise really comes on two levels. One, discover and learn about the franchise. There's franchise consultation like our firm does. That's a free resource. So if you run into a franchise consultant that wants to send you a bill, something's wrong there. That's a free resource. The franchisors pay us to help them validate and educate interested franchisees. So take advantage of that free resource. Get to know the franchisor. As I said, that information is out there, not only in the disclosure documents, but they're going to put a litany of information out there about who they are and how their business model operates. Take advantage of that. Learn what it is. Compare one against the other. Let's say you're interested in a home painting business. Well, look at 3 of them, because I know from operating with many of those home service brands that I can think of 3 home painting service franchises that are created very uniquely, not only from how the franchisor operates it, but how the franchisee would operate on a day-to-day. So understand what the franchisor and what their system that they've created is all about. Understand the economics of it. It's a business venture. It's a for-profit business venture. You need to know all the puts and pulls and all the KPIs that are going to drive to profitability and eventual return on your investment. Understand what a day in the life is for a franchisee. The last thing you want to do is get into something that, even if it pays economically, but you just hate doing it every day. For a lot of people, that's not going to float. So you want to understand what a day in the life of a franchisee really is. And then legal counsel. If you get to that point, there's a lot of contracts involved in franchising, not the least of which is a franchise agreement that's going to be pretty toothy. And honestly, it's going to be, favorable to the franchisor. They set it up that way. So you're going to want legal counsel. And in this case, legal counsel is not there to redline these contracts. So what I advise is you want legal counsel, and you want legal counsel that has franchise experience. They don't need to go through and try and redline a franchise agreement or redline an FDD. That doesn't exist. They're not going to change. The offer, generally speaking, is what it is. What you want an experienced franchise legal counsel to help advise on are, where are the risks? Where are the potholes? So just so you know, when you get into business, here are some things that you may want to try and avoid and just be aware of when you get into to a binding 10-year agreement. So you may not have to do that right from the outset, but at some point, if you get serious about signing a franchise agreement, money well spent to pay for some experienced legal counsel in that area. And then the other general area that I think you need to explore is more introspective. Understand when you go into the franchise discovery phase, understand what you're looking to get out of this. Monetary investment, time, capacity, and involvement, your industries of interest, or sometimes there's just industries of no interest and I won't ever do that. Returns. What are the short-term returns you need? What are the long-term returns? Some people are buying a franchise for a 5-year exit. Some people are buying it to replace a 6-figure executive salary. Oftentimes those two things are not aligned and they're not going to be under the same system. So are you looking for short-term gain? You're looking for long-term gain. You have to be aware of that and use that knowledge to then align with the right franchise model. And like I referenced earlier, the quality of life. What are the things that are important to you? I had an individual I talked to last week. They came to me and initially they said, we want to own a rather large footprint restaurant. And their whole goal with franchise ownership was to spend more time with their kids. And, spending the first part of my career in restaurant development, that was going to be a 70 to 80 an hour week job for this individual. So as we explored that, we realized, okay, full service restaurant may not be the model that's going to suit his ideal quality of life. And now we're exploring some other things that I think are going to allow him to enjoy weekends and enjoy some occasional travel with his wife and kids. So understand what defines your quality of life. Make sure that some of those introspective goals and needs are going to match what the franchise system is going to provide. So those are, some of the ways that we can, help best match franchise opportunities for you. May not be the universal perfect franchise, but it can be your perfect franchise just based on your need, right now and potentially in the long run. So what are the next steps? This is kind of a, in chronological order. This is generally speaking how the process will go. All the way from initial inquiry or curiosity of franchise ownership. Again, you can take free looks. There's lots of free test drives to be taken out there. So, there's no commitment if you're just kind of kicking tires on franchise models. And if you just have a curiosity, we love to engage with those conversations. And quite often they come full circle. I'm proud to say we've talked to individuals that franchising was not right now. And now 2 or 3 years later, post-COVID, some of those individuals are circling back and saying, okay, I'm in better position, better monetary position, better, whatever, psychographic position. They're just ready for business ownership now based on learnings that they did 3 years ago. So all the way from that initial inquiry to franchise signing, the most typical turnaround time, it's about a 4 to 6 month process of discovery, decision-making, deliberation, and eventual signing that franchise agreement. And a typical franchise owner is going to navigate the following sequence as they explore, select, and eventually launch their new franchise venture. Number one, and this is what we talked about on the last slide, understand your goals, understand your ownership profile. 2, start the exploration. Take advantage of the fact that there's tons of data out there. The franchisors have to disclose it. So take advantage of it. And a free consultant can help you mine and refine some of that data so it makes sense. So take advantage of the resources out there that can go and gather some of that information. You don't have to do all the heavy lifting. They can put it on a plate for you to really kind of chew through. Talk to the franchisors, compare and contrast, get the FDD disclosure. That's really the FDD, that federally regulated document, franchise disclosure document, that's got all the nooks and crannies, and it's going to tell you exactly what the offering is. So take advantage of that, get that, learn about it. It's going to help you understand not only that model, but I think it's also a great intro as to just what franchising is all about in general. Financing, if you get to that point and you need financing, and oftentimes, certainly if there's a brick and mortar component or a larger investment, you may want to take advantage of financing. There's tons of financing out there. Again, I mentioned I'm a former CFO, recovering CFO, if you will. I always advise start with your at-home relationship. And that's, it's a beautiful segue to just remind everybody, we're on this call with the GE Credit Union. That's a relationship right there. Start there. They're trusted advisors in the financing space. They'll tell you what to look for. And they may have some resources that are available. And if they're not available, they might be able to point you some other resources. So financing, if and when you get to that point, I always advise to start local, start with your relationships that you already have established. And then you can explore, financing options that might be there. Those are typically, there could be, conventional business loans. There might be 401k rollovers. There could be home equity loans. There's a litany of ways that if you need either foundational or just bridge financing for the new venture, there's a lot of ways to skin that. After we get that established, we're going to want to meet the franchise team, right? This is a partnership, and oftentimes it's a 10-year partnership. So you're going to meet these people. These are the people that you're going to be calling on when you've got a localized fire that you've got to put out in your business. Hopefully not literally, but just the proverbial business fire. You're working with them day to day. So you're going to know these people and know, kind of what makes them tick. Not certainly personally, yes, but just from a franchise business system, you want to understand, what kind of makes them run. Legal counsel, I mentioned that. You get to the point where you're going to want to, look deep into reviewing a franchise agreement or the FTD. At that time, you're going to want to hire legal counsel. And if everything checks out from there, you're going to make a decision. And that may be with you or a better half or a partnership group. You're going to make a decision and sign the franchise agreement. And from that point on, it's go time. And most often that starts with initial training and support that the franchisor is going to provide. And that training and support is all designed to lead you down the pathway of launching your business. And that launching of a business, if it involves real estate and build out, may take anywhere from 9 to 10 to 12 months. If it's a home service business that you're starting, out of your house or with a logoed van, that may start as early as 1 or 2 months after you sign the franchise agreement. But in any way, that is the sequence of events as you do discovery, you do your research, you talk to trusted advisors, you get your financing in order, you make the final decision, and then you're off and running. And like we said, when it's done correctly, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. So that's kind of the chronological next steps of, once you explore the franchise, and if you explore it to a point where it meets your satisfaction and you want to make the venture, you're off and running. So that outlines all the steps of franchise ownership right there. And that'll bring us to our next slide, which is, this is kind of wrapping it up. Again, a lot of what we covered today was just meant to be the 101, level setting what a franchise is, establishing some of the pros, the cons, the scope of the franchise industry in general, and just some things to look out for. And with that said, we're here to help, and there's many like us in the industry, and we're not selfish. We readily admit and encourage people, whether it's using the franchise department or others, use resources that know the space, whether it's from the franchisor side, franchisee side, whether they've been certified consultants and just know the landscape. Take advantage of the free resource. And for our firm, the way we operate, we provide free ownership assessments. That's a test you can take, an assessment tool you can take on our website. We'll get a version of that. You'll get a version of that. It'll give you some cues as to what business models may best align with your goals and your interests. We've got hundreds of brands to preview and review on our website. We've got up-to-date industry news and tips. And then certainly just personally, I'm a franchising geek, so I love to talk about it. And all those conversations, or certainly if you're local here in Cincinnati, coffee conversation is free of charge. And we're always happy to share what we know about the franchising industry. It's what we do every day. And I think those conversations have led us to meet some great people, both on the franchisor side and the franchisee side. And we're proud to say that, through our work, we've helped change, many lives over the last, 4 or 5 years. And certainly before that, at more of a franchisor side of helping people establish their own businesses, establish businesses for themselves, but not by themselves. And while there's nothing guaranteed, there's been a lot of success from our franchisees that have found a way to either exit their executive job that they were a little burnt out on, find their next ownership venture, or sometimes it's just the next chapter of their life that they or their partners or their spouse want to tackle. So we're here to help. I hope the information that we rolled out in the previous 40 minutes or so has been somewhat informative and helpful, and it's a 101. So if we ever need some 201, you just reach out to us and we're happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, for taking us through today's presentation. We'll go ahead and get into the Q&A portion. I know we had a couple pre-submitted questions, and then it looks like there may be a few coming through the chat as well. So let's go ahead and get started. The first question is there certain criteria you have to meet to be selected as a franchisee?
Yeah, great question. So in many cases, industry experience is not a requisite, but franchisors are going to look for a certain profile, or as we call it, a certain avatar of what their franchisee candidate will look like. So oftentimes that's going to come from economic. They're going to want to know that there's a certain liquidity and net worth involved, and that varies just based on the investment level. And then they're going to look for operating or management characteristics that are going to align with their business model. So we always advise that if a franchisor is not vetting the franchisee, that should be a red flag, because chances are they're in the business of selling their franchise territories and not awarding them. So there should be some criteria, but in general, there is no industry experience or investment level that is required for the general entrance into franchise ownership. Once you get into a specific brand, they will have a set of financial requirements, and then they're going to look for certain characteristics that they want out of their franchisees. But a lot of that's unlocked, not through some sort of assessment test, but really through them getting to know you through good old conversation. So that's where that meeting the franchise team, it certainly benefits them as much as it does to you, just to make sure that they view your work, your skill sets, and your work experience to lend itself nicely into their business model.
And then our next question, I'll go ahead and take this one. For those of you who may have joined after we got started, today's webinar is recorded. So if you want to take a look back at anything, it'll be up on our YouTube page in the coming weeks. And then as a reminder, the presentation slides can be found under your handout section. If you want to grab those and download them, you'll be able to look at those at your leisure. So make sure you grab that. And again, the webinar was recorded and will be up on our YouTube page in the coming weeks. And then Chris, I know we are coming up on our time. Do you want to do a couple more minutes of questions? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, it's perfect. Love it. Perfect.
So then our next question is, what might typical communication look like between the franchisor and franchisee?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that means post-franchise signing, but let me tackle both sides of that. So pre-franchise signing, while a candidate is courting the franchise brand and vice versa, they're going to go through regular communication of informing you on what they can disclose on the brand, and really what they disclose is everything except making economic representations or promises. So they're going to shy away from that, but they're going to disclose everything about the brand, the history of the brand, who the founders are, how much they've developed around the country, kind of the general day-to-day of the business model. They get to a point where they're going to share with you the formal franchise disclosure document. They will send you that franchise disclosure document. You acknowledge receipt, and then they have to, as regulated at a federal level, they have to back away from you for a couple of weeks to prevent any predatory lending. They need to give you time to review what they've disclosed, digest it, and then after that 2-week period, they're going to engage again, and they're going to likely invite you to either a virtual or a live, what they call discovery day, where you come out, and it gives you an opportunity to kind of get a little bit of a deeper look at the brand, the team, touch and feel the experience a little bit. And that's generally going to lead you to the point where it's decision time, right? You're either going to be in or out. And if you do decide to be in, then franchise agreement is signed, franchise fee exchanged, then you are in. You're in the party at that point. And everybody's communication cadence from there is going to differ, but it's safe to say that it's going to be regular. They are going to have almost daily conversation with you through the training and through the time when you get your business up and running. Oftentimes that's going to include, virtual training. Is certainly more prevalent now in a post-COVID world of doing, whatever we can do virtual, we do. But there's oftentimes going to be on-site training at the franchisor's corporate office, where the franchisee will go there, and oftentimes, we'll call that brand university time. Could range anywhere from 2 days to, a week plus, where you're working with other franchisees and the corporate team to really learn all the nuts and bolts of the brand. And then quite often, especially for brick and mortar concepts, they will also send a training team out to you at the time or right before grand opening. And then beyond that, what we see most typically is there's going to be more regular check-ins in that first year being the time where, it's like any business, that's the formative year. They want to get you quickly to a point of maturity. So oftentimes you're going to see, weekly calls with somebody at the franchisor, but certainly they're going to advocate, healthy systems will advocate communication between you and other franchisees, so you can have some peer learning and peer development. You've got an open door policy where you can reach out to reps on the franchisor team as often as needed. So that's a long-winded way of saying the communication is very regular, and it will be very clearly outlined in their project and operations map You'll know that before you go into the franchise agreement, and certainly once you sign that franchise agreement, that communication and project map is then enacted from there. So it will vary brand to brand, but it's safe to say that it's regular. And if you during your discovery process you don't feel that it's regular, that may be a red flag of of how to evaluate or devaluate the brand proposition itself.
Thank you. Let's do just a couple more questions. The next one being, can you kind of explain what a territory is?
Yeah, territory, again, is a little bit of a nuanced question brand by brand. So oftentimes if we think about, franchise models that are, close to home for all of us, let's think of a boutique fitness concept. You'll have a brick and mortar unit, and there may be a 2.5 or 3 mile ring radius drawn around that. And again, that will vary market to market and also brand to brand. But let's just use that example of you plop in boutique fitness concept A, there may be a 2 or 3 mile radius drawn around that. That's your territory. You have a unit and you've got a ring fence drawn around that about 3 miles that no one else is going to operate within that unit. Can't say other concepts won't be in there, but nobody from that franchise system. Another example of that, of what a territory is, if you owned a home service industry. So let's say, I gave example of the franchise that we're just starting to work with, where they specialize in pet waste removal from people's backyards. The way they'll define a territory is by the number of rooftops. So some of them will kind of round up or round down, and they might make it an entire county or an entire set of zip codes, but it often is started from just the number of rooftops that they want to get. That's going to kind of fit their business model, where they say, hey, we know that if there's 70,000 households, that we know that from those 70,000, if we can get X amount of paying clients, convert those to recurring revenue opportunities where we're going to their backyard and picking up their dog waste, and using this model as an example, they'll define their territory as the market space that they believe is needed to make a viable unit. So it could be by rooftops, could be by zip code. If it's a brick and mortar, oftentimes there's going to be a ring fence kind of drawn around your unit wherever you end up, finding the real estate that'll kind of, keep people at a 2, 3, 5 mile, bay, so that they don't infringe on your territory. But it's a great question. There really is some nuanced answers just based on the model, but everyone will have some sort of definition to what their own territory is respective to that unit and that business model.
Thank you. And then we'll go ahead and end on this question. If I open a franchise, will I be able to keep my full-time job?
Yeah, great question. That is, I don't know if it's the $1 million question, but I'd say it's oftentimes a $6-figure question that we get. I'd say 90% of the people we work with have that question, and the short answer is yes. The longer answer is not every model is going to sustain that. So that's where, when we go back to one of the slides that outlined owner operator model versus executive model versus semi-absentee, you're really going to want to understand what the business model is going to need and what they expect from their franchisee. Some of them promote that you hire a manager, you're kind of back-end support, leveraging other skill sets, maybe through a corporate job or elsewhere, but they want you to keep that job. To be frank about it, it allows a steady stream of income for you, so that as long as you can still provide enough attention to the franchise opportunity, it can be a good balance. You've got steady paycheck coming in. You're not going to be too desperate to pull or draw revenue from the new franchise, right out of the bat. And you kind of give it time to grow. So there are many opportunities that not only allow but prefer that option, but you really want to just explore that as you shop through franchises, because just as soon as I say some of them promote and encourage that sort of ownership model, there are some that do not allow that. So it really differs from model to model, from franchisor to franchisor. That's just part of the discovery process of learning what the model is going to not only provide you, but expect from you.
So that's going to conclude our Q&A session. If anything pops up after today's webinar, Jason's contact information is up on the screen. I'll leave that there for a moment, and then I'll go back to Chris's as well if you want to jot that down really fast. That is all the information we have for you today. Again, we hope everything was very informational and beneficial. So with that, thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.